Aye, aye. Good. Well, welcome to all of you. We're all delighted that you're here, and I'm myself. I'm excited to do this second time around, teach this course, Faith and Globalization. What I thought I'd do in this first part of this hour is give you a bit of an orientation of the genealogy of the course, what makes the course tick, what we are going to be doing. And then we'll have Martha Highsmith and Lucas. Martha Highsmith in the back. Here, Lucas Schweinfurt. I was going to pronounce it just about right. Was hesitating. Please come in. Give you some information about both about media and about security kinds of issues. I'll introduce you to TAs, and then my colleague, Professor Ray, who is going to be teaching the course together with us, will be giving a historical overview lecture on the issues concerning faith and globalization. So that's what we have in store for today. Alas, Tony Blair is not here today, but he's going to, I trust, show up on September 15th. So here we go. A little bit about genealogy. I mean, the course really emerged from conversations with Tony Blair. Tony Blair was very much interested as Prime Minister in globalization issues. That was in many ways a very important piece of his own political career. And he is interested in issues of faith. And he has come to believe that faith, or I think we should speak in plural, faiths, should stand up here or sit down. What's easier? Sit down? Good. Okay. He has come to believe that faiths, we should speak in plural, and globalization processes are two most important forces in the world today. Now, I'm not sure about the superlative myself, whether they are the most important forces in the world today, but certainly they are immensely important. And maybe it doesn't look like faiths are as important from the vantage point where we sit, but when looking worldwide, that certainly is the case. Now, if faiths were simply about certain feelings that one has, say feelings of awe or something like that, right? In regard to the unknown. If it's more simply about set of propositions that one believes and which one can prove, right? That's why they're called faiths, some people say. Obviously, they couldn't have the kind of power that they have. But faiths were always about a way of life, way of orienting oneself in the world, a way of constructing reality as a whole, placing oneself in that reality and conceiving what is the good life, what is the proper life to live as a human being. And faiths as such are enduring, right? You can look at Judaism 4,000 years, Christianity 2,000 years, Islam 1,500 years, and you can speak the same way of Buddhism, you can speak the same way of Hinduism. Empires come and go, faiths in many ways remain. And it's not just something about the past. Faiths continue to be a very significant force in the world. Today they're growing numerically in relative and absolute terms, and they're also growing in influence. So you have the faiths as a major force that shapes the way in which people think of themselves, of the world, and how to live in the world. And you've got on the other side globalization processes. And I don't think we need to talk too much and too long about the importance of globalization processes, not just the interconnectivity and interdependence of the world that mark globalization as we experience it today, but also, I think, the immense pace at which these processes are proceeding and are revolutionizing almost daily, weekly, or at least yearly, the world as we know it. And so these two forces coming together pose very significant challenges. Now, so faith and globalization. My own interest in that question arises because, you know, as a theologian, what do theologians do? Theologians do faith, right? They do, in a sense, faiths. When I fly sometimes. People ask me, what do I do? And I say that I'm a theologian. Occasionally it sparks some interest in the conversation, but soon it peters out, right? Theologian, what? Then I start talking about, well, what do you do? I teach religion. Aha, when religion was prominently in media, even negatively, it was kind of interesting, right? And then conversation would go on and then peter out. Right now, if I say I teach religion, oh yeah, a bit of a yawn. So right now what I say people pay me at Yale, believe it or not, to ask these large questions. And questions, who are we? What are we here for as human beings? What is a good way to live one's life, and so forth? And that generates a bit more of discussion. And it tells you also a little bit about how I conceive of my work as a theologian. It's not simply about what particular group of folks believe or practice. It's really about way of life. Studying how faith, in my case this is Christian faith, but also broadly construed faiths, multiple faiths, how they intersect with the ways in which people live their lives, lead their lives. How do they intersect with the whole area of business and economics? How do these faiths intersect with the whole area of politics? How do they intersect with a broader understood culture and those cultural processes, technology, media? All of these things are of immense interest to me. One of the reasons why I became a theologian is that you can reflect on anything and still be a theologian, right? And so for curious minds like myself, this was just great. I was a kid in the candy shop. I could pick up any subject, and I could study it from theological vantage point. But you see, my interest is intersection between faith and. So faith and globalization becomes a very important issue. I've done some work in faith and conflict, and this is obviously one of the important areas in terms of faith and globalization, because globalization, as Tony will no doubt mention, Mr. Blair, I should say, will no doubt mention, brings people together, but faiths often separate people because they define the group identities of people, and often in opposition to other groups. So that faiths, globalization processes, and conflict is a very important issue to study. As well, then, not just resources or not just the potential of faith to create conflict, but also possible resources of faith to contribute to building bridges between different cultures. That too is an important aspect of what we study. And I've written on this, I'm very much interested in that question. I'm also interested in the question of the relationship between religion and human flourishing. What are the visions of human flourishing that are embedded in religious convictions? Religions, as I said earlier, are about a way of life. They are about interpreting reality as a whole, situating human beings in that reality, and asking what makes up for life well lived. All religions ask that question. Globalization processes, in many ways also, are about implicit, at least, vision of a good life. And I've come to believe, and maybe that's controversial, maybe that's something we should be discussing in this course too, but I've come to believe that Philip Reeve was right when he said that our culture, Western culture, predominant Western culture, and the culture that globalization processes are spreading widely, is a culture of a managed pursuit of pleasure, and not a culture of sustained endeavor to lead a good life, or lead the good life, as defined by foundational symbols and convictions. Our culture is a culture of the managed pursuit of pleasure, not a culture of a sustained endeavor to lead the good life. Now, if that's true, and if globalization processes are carrying on their wings this type of culture, then it may not be surprising that at many places religions, faiths, and globalization processes clash. Right? Because religions, if I was right, in the way I describe them, religions are about sustained pursuit of the good life. Now, I don't think necessarily that we need to pose adversarial relationship between globalization processes and faiths. I think within globalization processes there is a space for much more robust pursuit of the sustained vision of the good life. But that, I think, is one important question that drives me as I'm looking and studying this issue. And that's also one of the issues that will run almost like a red thread throughout the course. Should we pose that question? Should that be a significant question for us to explore? That's also what we are going to be asking. Can we pose that question in plausible and robust way in today's environment? And how do we do that in the context of religious pluralism? You don't have one vision of the good life. You have multiplicity of visions of good life that often collide. I think those are the great issues that we are facing at the intersection between faith and globalization. Now, we'll highlight some of these issues of conflict as well as identity creation and also of the vision of human flourishing throughout the course. And we have divided then the course in roughly, I think, in 4 areas. These 4 areas are first an orientation about general relationship between faith and globalization processes, faiths, I should say in plural always, faiths and globalization processes. This is the first part of our course. And then in the second part of our course, 2 sessions on faith and conflict, faiths and conflict, faiths and reconciliation, kind of cluster of issues of conflict and reconciliation. Then we have a cluster of 3 sessions on faith and broadly understood economic issues, market values in the market, corporate governance, and the questions of alleviation of poverty. And then fourth, we have kind of relatively amorphous category of faith and culture. And there we'll deal with gender issues and globalization processes, a very significant aspect of globalization processes, human rights and globalization processes, rights language being emerging as the new moral code of the globalized world, even though it's true that a lot of people understand quite different things under rights. Nonetheless, the right functions as almost formally as that common moral code. And then globalization processes and politics, roughly the question of the relationship between faiths and democracy, which I think is one of the significant issues in the world today. And finally, relationship between religions. So that's roughly the outline of what we will be doing in this course. Now, I'm sure we could have taken up many more significant topics. And for us, as we were designing the course, it was always the question, how do you squeeze what seems to be the project of a lifetime into 12 sessions, right? Something must be left out. Some traditions end up being underemphasized, and we have shifted in the course of development of the course from the first iteration to the second, emphasizing different religious tradition. Geographic regions have to some regions have to suffer, right? Being attended to less than others. Some topics have to take the back seat. For instance, ecology is nowhere there to be seen, right? But obviously, globalization processes are part and parcel of creating a single globe with immense impact or ecological impact. And the 2 processes of ecological impact of globalization processes, as well as of religious convictions, is a very significant one of the defining issues of our age. Or technology as such, for instance, is not being addressed. Media is not being addressed directly. All sorts of issues of this sort, and I'm sure you're going to have a list of your own which need to be added. And you know, as it happens, I think the course will probably have one more, certainly have one more iteration, and we'll have one more version. We'll recraft it, and hopefully we can enrich it and find ways in which to express the kind of the rich diversity of that course, of the topic that this course needs to address. So roughly now a few words about the structure of of our time together. It's going to be structured something like this, that either Professor Ray or myself or both of us together are going to offer a few introductory remarks, and those introductory remarks will serve not just to introduce a topic for a particular session, but also somehow to tie this session with what went on before and what is going to possibly follow. Because one of the dangers of a course of this sort is that it's going to splinter in all sorts of directions. So we need to make sure that there is a kind of, that we always keep in mind where we are in the whole, and how, notwithstanding all the disparate readings that you are doing and questions that you're asking, how all these things somehow hang together and make up a whole. So that's going to be partly the function of these introductory remarks. Then generally we will have either Tony Blair is going to be present for 5 sessions, or we will have guests who will come, and we will give Tony Blair or guests the opportunity to address the class. Tony Blair probably something like 20-25 minutes, guests rigorously 15 minutes. And that in order to give you the opportunity then to have a question and answer period to ask guests. And there are some sessions, I think, where one of us will be giving this second presentation rather than either Tony Blair or the guest. But for us to engage the presenter and the issue, and then we're going to take a break, about 10-minute break. And we are going to kick out our guests. Not Tony Blair, he stays, because he's part of the stable teaching group. But the guests we will do. And then we will try to have a seminar where we will address each other and address specifically the larger question that this session, each particular session is asking. As you will have, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to read session descriptions, they all center around a single, what we think is a single large and important question. And so what we're going to try to do in this discussion period is to see in what ways the kinds of things that we have been reading for the class, discussing in sections, listening our presenters, guests who came, in what ways do all these things can be brought to bear on that question that we are pursuing for that particular day. We found it important to have a single question, not so much to exclude any other possible question, but to have a single question so as to focus our discussion. Even within each of the sessions, it's sometimes, they're overwhelmingly big, right? And so even there we need to zero in and limit ourselves. So the function of question that we have posed is for us to try and do that. Hopefully these are good questions that we are pursuing, and as a result of this course, we'll try to possibly revise them, and you can help us revise them and tell us why this wasn't the right question to ask, why we have to ask a different or more precise kind of a question.